Stephen A. Smith is one of the most iconic personalities in sports media today. His loud, brash, no nonsense style could be seen as polarizing, but no matter how you feel about his takes, you have to admit he's at least entertaining. And that it factor is precisely why Smith is about to get a big payday. After months of back and forth between his agents at WME and top executives in Bristol, ESPN's most popular personality of the 21st century is close to finalizing a deal that will keep him at ESPN for at least 5 more years and pay him north of $100 million in total. According to Andrew Marchand of The Athletic, who broke the initial story, Stephen A's negotiations have centered around both 5 and 6 year terms, meaning the final contract could be worth $100 or $120 million when it's all said and done. Now, $120 million is an astronomical number that many people could have never imagined. I'm not saying Smith isn't worth the price tag, but a $20 million a year deal would make him the highest paid talent in ESPN's 45-year history, ahead of guys like Troy Aikman, Pat McAfee, and Joe Buck. The idea of paying a sports TV host that kind of money would have seemed ridiculous even 5 years ago. Usually, when you hear about a contract of that size, you assume it's for one of the athletes, not the guy who talks about them on TV. Even ESPN's other big contracts are part of a larger package. Aikman and Buck's combined $33 million a year salaries are just a drop in the bucket, considering ESPN's $30 billion investment in Monday Night Football. Pat McAfee's $17 million a year contract is structured as a licensing deal, meaning McAfee is still responsible for paying all of his production costs, such as employee salaries and the 7-figure guest fees he's paying to Aaron Rodgers and Bill Belichick. So, while Buck and Aikman and McAfee's big salaries are part of a bigger package, Stephen A. Smith is essentially the opposite. First Take might still be the most watched sports show on TV, but that's like saying you run the most profitable newspaper. ESPN still makes most of its money off cable affiliate fees, and we all know people hold off on cutting the cord because of live sports rights. Not to hear Stephen A. wax poetically about the Knicks' latest winning streak. With that being said, though, the devil is in the details. And some of the intricacies of Stephen A. Smith's new contract could make this a no-brainer for the worldwide leader in sports. But to better understand Stephen A.'s future, we have to go back into his past. The year was 2009. Glee was making a cappella groups cool for the first time ever. Kanye was interrupting Taylor Swift at the VMAs, and you were probably receiving relentless invites to play Farmville from your weird Aunt Debbie. In the world of sports media, though, the spotlight was on Stephen A. Smith. Seen as a rising star in the industry, ESPN hired Smith after a successful career covering sports in Philadelphia and New York City, including stops at the Philadelphia Inquirer and the New York Daily News. Immediately, Smith was given his own show on ESPN Radio. He was becoming an increasingly important member of the network's NBA coverage, as well as spending 3 years hosting ESPN's Quite Frankly, for more than 300 episodes and almost 800 guest interviews. But, as they say, all good things must come to an end, and come to an end they did. Due to low ratings and higher than average production costs, Smith's ESPN show was canceled. When he met with an ESPN executive in the lobby restaurant of the Marriott Hotel in Stamford, Connecticut, Smith was expecting a new assignment on the network. Instead, ESPN ended his contract. It was an important moment in Stephen A's career. He thought his career in sports media was over just as fast as it had started.
What it said to me was that they wanted nothing to do with me. And that was devastating. So I was driving home, and then I pulled over on one of those mobile gas station rest stops while I was driving back to New York. And all I did was take both of my hands and bury my face in my hands because I knew it was over and I had no prospects. Zero.
As we know now, Stephen A. Smith's career was far from over, and he got back in the game just 10 months later, securing a job at Fox Sports. But things weren't exactly the same, with his annual salary dropping 72%, from $1.3 million a year at ESPN to $360,000 at Fox. But it was valuable in another way, as Smith was able to reflect on some of the less than desirable professional antics he had at ESPN.
I was sitting up there, I felt betrayed. I felt ticked off. And you know, my mother let me lick my wounds for a couple of days. And then she said, what could you have done better? You sure you didn't do anything? And I thought about all this stuff. I'm like, what is she talking about? This is just not true. This is not right. I work hard. I do this. I do that. And then I started thinking about it. Yeah, I was a pain in the ass. I did kind of complain a little bit too much. But the biggest thing that I remember doing is that I always came to the bosses with problems. I never came to them with solutions. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean always like I was a perennial complainer, because I've never been that. That's not my style. But anytime I spoke to them about something that bothered me, my point in making that statement is that it was always about the problem, never the solution. And I learned when I sat back and reflected on the mistakes that I had made in my career at the time, I learned that no boss wants to talk to anybody that doesn't have solutions.
Now look, this isn't some rags to riches story. Stephen A. Smith had hundreds of thousands of dollars in his bank account when ESPN let him go, and his $360,000 annual salary at Fox Sports still would have put him within the top few percentage points of America's highest earners. But fast forward 15 years, and the saga of Stephen Anthony Smith, yes, the A stands for Anthony, has become an entirely different story. Returning to ESPN in 2011, Smith quickly became one of the most important personalities at the network. He's been the host of First Take for 12 years running and now serves as the executive producer as well. While First Take has changed its format a few times over the years, going from a one-on-one debate show against guys like Max Kellerman or Skip Bayless to more of a rotating cast of characters today. Regardless of the show's structure, Stephen A. Smith has always been the main draw, and the numbers he's helped the show rack up over the years aren't too shabby either. Since its debut, First Take has been the most popular morning sports show in the country year after year. Nowadays, it averages over 500,000 viewers per episode. For some perspective, that's about 4 times as many viewers as Fox Sports got for Undisputed before it was canceled back in August. But it's not just ratings that make Stephen A. so valuable. In a medium dominated by the louder I yell, the more right I sound mindset, Stephen A. and First Take have somehow managed to build authority. Agents watch the show every morning to see what Stephen A. is saying about their players. Owners tune in to get a sense of how the public feels about their team. And the show has even become a part of the sports storylines themselves, with Stephen A. getting into many public spats with players based on what he says about them on TV. Anyone remember Kwame Brown? Yeah, that's what I thought. It's this level of authority that has helped Stephen A. become the hottest commodity in sports. He might say some ridiculous things sometimes.
Stay off the weed. Who are you, Snoop Dogg in the green room? I mean, what the hell is going on? You want to sit there and stay on the weed?
But his demeanor and delivery alone will get you to watch. No matter what he's talking about, Smith can make it entertaining. And I seriously mean it when I say it doesn't matter what he's talking about.
Stephen A. Smith, when you think about the GOAT of sports, you think about Mike with 6, Brady with 7 rings. But where do you rank a guy like Lightning McQueen with 7 Piston cups?
I would tell you he wouldn't be the GOAT. How are you going to be the GOAT? Because you talk about the movie Cars, right? You talk about the movie Cars, right? I mean, when you talk about Stripper King Weathers and Lightning McQueen, they're both tied with 7 Piston cups. Strip Weathers, you forgot about him? How can you be the GOAT? You got somebody that's tied with you. You got somebody that's tied with you. Sorry, that ain't gonna work. Well, I know you tried to catch me with that. You didn't think I knew that about that. You didn't think I knew about cars, did you?
When you think about
you slept on the brother.
It's not
you slept on the brother.
Piston cups. He's got 28 circuits. He got 28 circuits under his belt too.
Strip Weathers has 7 Piston cups. I am not about to sit here and argue with a grown-ass man about the movie Cars.
Oh, come on now,
Strip Weathers has 7 Piston cups. You should have brought me somebody that didn't have as many Piston cups.
It's because of this undefiable it factor that ESPN is comfortable with paying him $20 million a year despite roughly 40 million Americans cutting cable over the last decade. His final contract will probably include all the usual stuff seen in contracts for high-priced TV talent, including travel reimbursements and the salary of an executive assistant. But it's not like ESPN is just paying Stephen A. Smith $20 million a year to host First Take. Think of the $20 million as a combination of multiple deals. His current ESPN deal includes a payment to his production company, SAS Productions, for their work on First Take. And as reported by John Orand of Puck, ESPN Bet and Disney have agreed to pay several $million of Stephen A.'s eventual $20 million a year contract. When you look at it that way, it's a win-win for everyone. ESPN Bet would have had to pay millions for the right to use Smith's name, image, and likeness. First Take has to spend money on production services, whether it's spent in-house or with SAS Productions. And Disney can benefit too, thanks to being able to leverage Smith's fame to secure advertising deals at their upfronts each year, as well as having a first look at any new projects that he wants to do in sports. It's truly a sign the TV business has become more and more complicated over the years. Guys like Stephen A. now require more complex contracts because they have more options available to them, giving them massive bargaining power. Remember Tom Brady's 10-year, $375 million deal with Fox? While that number might seem massive, the contract has similar aspects to what is expected with Stephen A.'s, including the first right of refusal on all new TB12 projects, appearance fees, and social media commitments. In the same way Disney is using Smith to increase ad revenue, Fox is using Brady as a way to attract advertisers to help pay for all the money they spend on their NFL rights package. Smith, however, is also giving ESPN the added benefit of helping the network transition viewers to streaming. With his new podcast, The Stephen A. Smith Show, he's proven his influence goes far beyond the reach of ESPN. The Stephen A. Smith Show is just 2 years old, but has already amassed 1 million followers on YouTube. Not to mention the fact that Smith has now become more involved in topics outside of sports, talking at length about the election, getting roped in the Kendrick Lamar-Drake beef, and dropping a number of episodes focused on the downfall of Diddy. Smith isn't just growing his own podcast either, as he's helped bring in new voices to ESPN as well, adding guys like Shannon Sharp and, more recently, Cam Newton. Looking at the most recent decisions at the network, ESPN has made it very clear they'll cut high-priced talent in favor of stars with large audiences outside of the network, paying big money to people like Pat McAfee, Mina Kimes, Jason Kelsey, and Kirk Herbstreit. Stephen A. Smith is the latest decision to follow this strategy, even if it costs ESPN more than they've spent in their entire history on a single on-air talent. But as history shows, that $100 million contract will likely pay off for ESPN, as Stephen A. Smith has shown us time and time again, he's the guy who people tune in to watch. Whether he's taunting Cowboys fans or masterfully breaking down Pixar's Cars, Stephen A. Smith will always be must-see TV.